Level 1. Young boy. You were born on February 22, 1732, on a tobacco plantation in Westmoreland County, Virginia. The colony is British, the king is distant, the world beyond the Atlantic is the world that matters. Or so everyone around you believes. You will spend your entire life proving otherwise. Your father, Augustine Washington, is a moderately prosperous planter. Not rich by the standards of Virginia's great families, but comfortable enough. You have land, slaves, and the quiet anxiety of a man who always wants more than he has. Augustine dies when you are 11. It arrives without warning and rearranges everything. You are the eldest son of his second marriage. Inheritance flows to the sons of the first. Your older half-brother Lawrence receives the finest property, a plantation on the Potomac he will rename Mount Vernon. You receive a smaller portion. The future feels narrower than it did yesterday. But Lawrence takes you in. He becomes your model, your mentor. The substitute for a father gone too soon. He is well-connected, military-minded, and widely admired. You watch him carefully. You absorb everything. At 11 years old, you are already doing what you will do for the rest of your life, studying the men around you, deciding who you want to become. You have no formal education, no university, no Latin or Greek like the wealthy Virginian elite. What you have is surveying, which you learn with obsessive precision, and an appetite for self-improvement so fierce it borders on desperation. You practice your handwriting until it is immaculate. You copy rules of civility from a conduct manual and treat them like commandments. You are building yourself from the outside in. You will never entirely stop. Level 2. Teenage surveyor. At 16, you cross the Blue Ridge Mountains for the first time as part of a surveying expedition into the Shenandoah Valley. It is your first real glimpse of the American interior. Vast, wild, indifferent to the colonial order you were raised inside. Something in you responds to the scale of it. You will spend the rest of your life thinking in continental terms, even when everyone around you thinks only in county lines. Surveying is not glamorous work. You sleep outdoors in all weather. You wade rivers. You argue with difficult landowners who all believe they own the same piece of earth. But the work gives you something invaluable. You develop an eye for terrain, for high ground, river crossings, defensible ridgelines. It will matter enormously later, in ways you cannot yet imagine. Lawrence falls ill. Tuberculosis, slow and relentless. You accompany him to Barbados in 1751, hoping the warm climate will help. It is the only time in your life you will ever leave North America. On the island, you contract smallpox. It nearly kills you. It leaves permanent marks on your face. But it also leaves you immune, a fact that will prove significant during a war not yet begun. Lawrence dies in 1752. You are 20 years old. The world rearranges itself around his absence. His death leaves you with partial access to Mount Vernon and a growing certainty. If you are going to be anything in this life, you will have to make it happen yourself. No one is coming to hand you a future. You have known this since you were 11. Now you know it in your bones. You apply for a military commission. Virginia needs officers. You need a stage. Level 3. Young soldier. The timing is difficult and exactly right. In 1753, the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia sends you into the Ohio wilderness on a diplomatic mission. Your task is simple. Carry a message to the French. Tell them to leave territory the British claim as their own. You are 21 years old. You travel hundreds of miles through frozen forest in the dead of winter. You nearly drown crossing an icy river. You deliver the message. The French refuse. You carry their refusal back through the same frozen wilderness. You are promoted, given soldiers, sent back. Then things go wrong in a way that will follow you for years. Near a place called Jumonville Glen, your small force ambushes a French scouting party. It is the opening skirmish of what will become a world war. The 7 Years' War, fought across 3 continents. You are 22 years old. You have just fired one of the opening shots. You write to your brother that there was something charming in the sound of bullets whistling past. It is the most reckless thing you will ever put in writing. You will spend decades wishing you had not. The French retaliate. You are forced to surrender at a hastily constructed outpost you name Fort Necessity. The terms are humiliating. You sign a document that appears to admit to the assassination of a French officer. You retreat. Virginia is not impressed, but you do not retreat permanently. You volunteer to serve under British General Braddock the following year. Braddock is ambushed and killed. 2 horses are shot from under you. Your coat is pierced by 4 musket balls. You are not hit once. You organize the retreat that saves what remains of the column. People begin to speak of you in terms that make you uncomfortable. Words like destiny, words like providence. You take careful note of Braddock's failures. British regulars trained for European-style warfare were slaughtered by an enemy that fought from behind trees, that used the terrain. You file this observation away. You do not forget it. Level 4. Wealthy planter. In 1759, you marry Martha Dandridge Custis. She is a wealthy widow with 2 children and a substantial estate. You are 26. She is 27. The marriage is practical in the way most marriages among Virginia planters are, but it is also genuinely warm. Martha is steady, organized, and emotionally intelligent in ways that balance your own, more guarded nature. She will follow you to military camps in the dead of winter. She will hold things together at Mount Vernon when you are gone for years at a time. You will rely on her more than you ever fully say out loud. With her wealth added to your own, you become a man of the first rank in Virginia. You take your seat in the House of Burgesses. You manage Mount Vernon with obsessive attention to detail. You track crop yields. You experiment with new varieties. You write letters about soil composition with the same focus you give to military planning. You want the plantation to run perfectly. It never quite does. You never stop trying. Slowly, and then all at once, you begin to understand what British imperial policy actually means for men like you. The taxes, the trade restrictions, the assumption that colonial interests exist to serve the mother country. You are not a natural revolutionary. By temperament, you are a man who wanted to be accepted by the British establishment. You wore the uniform. You sought the commission. The establishment declined to grant it. The rejection clarifies things. If the system will not accommodate you, perhaps the system is the problem. You watch men like Patrick Henry argue with increasing fire in the Burgesses. You say less than they do. You listen more. You are building a position. Not a speech, a stance. By the early 1770s, you are one of the most respected men in Virginia. When the colonies begin organizing against British policy, your name appears on committees without effort. When the moment arrives, you are ready. Level 5. Commander. In June of 1775, the Second Continental Congress appoints you Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. You accept with a speech of deliberate humility. You acknowledge your own limitations. You ask for no salary beyond expenses. You insist the records show you did not seek this. Whether these are performative gestures or genuine expressions of doubt, only you know. Perhaps both things are true at the same time. What you inherit is not an army. It is a collection of militias from 13 colonies that barely agree on anything, armed with weapons of varying quality, led by officers of wildly uneven competence, funded by a government with no reliable money. Men enlist for short terms and leave when their time is up, regardless of what is happening on the battlefield. You will spend the next 8 years fighting the British with one hand and fighting the collapse of your own force with the other. The early months are revealing. You lay siege to Boston and force the British to evacuate. It establishes something important about your reputation. Then things deteriorate. The New York campaign of 1776 is a series of near catastrophes. You are outmaneuvered repeatedly by British General Howe, who commands a professional army with naval support and vastly superior numbers. You lose Long Island badly. You lose Manhattan. You retreat across New Jersey with a shrinking, demoralized force and the enemy in pursuit. Men in Congress and in your own officer corps begin to wonder if you are the right choice. The whispers are careful but audible. You hear them. You do not respond directly. Instead, you plan the crossing of the Delaware River on the night of December 25, 1776. In freezing darkness, you move 2,400 men across an ice-choked river. You march 9 miles through sleet. You strike the Hessian garrison at Trenton before dawn. The victory is tactically modest. Symbolically, it saves the revolution. Level 6. Exhausted General. The war does not become easier after Trenton. Strategic retreat. Tactical survival. Occasional brilliant counterstrike. This becomes your template for years. You are not trying to defeat the British Army outright. You understand with increasing clarity that you cannot. What you are doing is keeping an army in the field long enough for the political situation to shift. You need the British to tire. You need France to intervene. You need time, and time requires survival above everything else. Valley Forge in the winter of 1777 to 1778 is the low point. 11,000 men. Not enough food. Not enough clothing. Not enough shelter against a Pennsylvania winter that feels personally hostile. Men die of cold and disease at a rate that should end the army entirely. You write desperate letters to Congress. Congress cannot respond effectively. The gap between what government promises and what it can actually deliver will haunt your entire public life. But something remarkable happens at Valley Forge. A Prussian officer named Friedrich von Steuben arrives and begins drilling your men. He teaches them the manual of arms, the mechanics of battlefield movement, the discipline that separates a rabble from a real army. You give him room to work. You watch the transformation happen. The men who march out of Valley Forge in the spring of 1778 are different from the men who stumbled in. France enters the war as an American ally. The strategic picture shifts immediately. The British now face a naval threat that stretches their resources across the Atlantic world. The end is still years away, but it is now visible from where you stand. You adjust everything accordingly. Hold, contain. Wait for the moment when a decisive blow becomes possible. You are not a tactical genius in the way some commanders are. You know this about yourself. What you are is something rarer. A man who keeps going, who holds an institution together through sheer personal credibility when the institution itself is on the edge of dissolving. Level 7. Victorious leader. In the summer of 1781, intelligence reaches you that a French fleet is moving toward the Chesapeake Bay. British General Cornwallis has positioned his army at Yorktown, Virginia, with his back to the water. You see the geometry immediately. If the French fleet can seal the bay, Cornwallis is trapped. You have been waiting 6 years for a moment exactly like this one. The march to Yorktown is one of the great logistical achievements of 18th century warfare. You move your combined American and French forces, 17,000 men, from New York to Virginia in a coordinated maneuver. That deceives the British into believing you are targeting New York. By the time they understand what is actually happening, you are already in Virginia. The siege begins in October. It is formal and methodical. Parallel trenches advance toward the British lines. Artillery pounds the defenses day and night. The British position becomes untenable within weeks. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrenders. He claims illness and sends a subordinate to hand over his sword. You respond with perfect symmetry. Since Cornwallis will not come himself, you direct your own second-in-command to receive the sword. Even at the moment of total victory, you maintain the formal dignity that has defined your public persona from the beginning. The British band plays a tune called The World Turned Upside Down. It is an appropriate choice. The greatest military power on earth has been forced to recognize the independence of 13 former colonies by a general who spent most of the war retreating, who kept an underfunded, half-starved militia alive through sheer refusal to give up. You write a quiet letter home to Martha. Then you begin thinking about what comes next. What comes next is, in many ways, harder than anything that came before. Level 8. Calm older man. In December of 1783, you walk into the Maryland State House in Annapolis and resign your commission as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. The gesture is extraordinary. So extraordinary that King George III, when told of it, reportedly said that if Washington did this, he would be the greatest man in the world. Power in the 18th century is not something men give back. Cromwell did not give it back. Caesar did not give it back. Every precedent in the history of military command says that the man who wins the war becomes the dominant political figure of whatever follows. Often he becomes king, often something worse. You give it back. You return to Mount Vernon. You plant crops. You manage the estate. You write letters. You host visitors who come to see the famous general at peace. Some part of that image is genuine. You love this land. You have always loved this land. But you are watching. The Articles of Confederation are failing. Congress cannot levy taxes. It cannot enforce its own decisions. The 13 states act as 13 small nations, each pursuing its own interest. The result is a slow unraveling you observe with alarm. Shays' rebellion in Massachusetts, farmers taking up arms against debt collectors, is the clearest warning sign. A republic with no functioning central government will not survive. You are persuaded, against your stated desire to remain retired, to attend the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787. Your presence alone gives the proceedings a legitimacy they would not otherwise have. You preside. You say little from the chair, but your views are known, shared privately, with the particular authority of a man whose sacrifice has made his opinion worth listening to. The Constitution that emerges is imperfect, you know this. But it is a framework that can work. You lend it your name. It is the most valuable thing anyone can offer it. Level 9. Elderly statesman. In April of 1789, you are unanimously elected the first president of the United States. Every single electoral vote goes to you. It is the only time in American history this will happen. You take the oath in New York City wearing a suit of American-made cloth. The symbolism matters. You understand symbolism better than most people understand anything. The problem is that no one has done this before. There is no model. Every decision you make becomes a precedent. How to receive visitors, what to call yourself, how to organize the executive branch. Whether the president bows or shakes hands, you move with deliberate care through each choice. What you do will be copied, hardened into custom, eventually mistaken for the natural order of things. Your cabinet contains men of extraordinary ability and extraordinary disagreement. Alexander Hamilton, your Treasury Secretary, wants a strong central government and a national financial system. Thomas Jefferson, your Secretary of State, wants power kept close to the states and the people. They despise each other with a philosophical intensity that produces real consequences. You sit between them. You make decisions neither fully approves of. You hold a government together that is being pulled in opposite directions before it has stood 5 years. Foreign policy is its own ordeal. France and Britain go to war. Both sides expect America to choose. Your neutrality proclamation of 1793 is attacked from every direction. You hold the line. A new nation cannot survive being drawn into a European war before its institutions have taken root. You know this with the certainty of someone who spent 8 years building those institutions from nothing. You serve 2 terms. You are urged to serve a third. You refuse. In September of 1796, you publish your farewell address. You warn against permanent foreign alliances. You warn against the spirit of party. You warn against letting regional loyalty replace national identity. Some of these warnings will be heeded. Many will not. But the act of writing them is the act of a man who has thought more carefully about what this republic requires than almost anyone alive. You return to Mount Vernon for the last time. You manage the farm. You write letters. You receive visitors. In December of 1799, after riding through cold rain to inspect the fields, you fall ill. A throat infection, severe and fast-moving. The medical treatments of the era almost certainly accelerate your death. On December 14, 1799, at 67 years old, you die quietly, surrounded by people who love you. Your last words are 'Tis well, spare, controlled, and completely in character. You are a boy who lost his father at 11, and spent the rest of his life building the authority that loss took from him. You are a soldier who learned more from defeat than from victory. You are a general who survived not through brilliance but through endurance, through the refusal to stop when every reasonable calculation said to stop. You are a president who set every precedent that mattered, and then stepped aside before those precedents could be broken. You built no temples to yourself. You named no cities in your own honor. You did not stay in power long enough to become the thing you had fought against. That restraint, that deliberate choosing to be less than you could have taken, is the most radical act of your entire life. More radical than crossing the Delaware. More radical than 8 years in the field. You are George Washington, and a country that exists because of what you held together, imperfect and argumentative and perpetually unfinished, is still more than 2 centuries later trying to become what you believed it could be.